top 12, the playoffs, it was revealed, right? The bracket. I really thought it was interesting how ADs and commissioners and coaches were all like politicking leading up to the last weekend. That's fine, fighting for your turf. But here's Greg Byrne. And the part about this statement from Greg Byrne, it's not so much fighting for his school, Alabama, it's what he was actually bringing up, which to me had nothing to do with where Alabama was. And I saw this quite a bit the last 2 or 3 days. Disappointed with the outcome. We had an extremely challenging schedule. Recognized there were 2 games in particular that we did not perform well. Yeah, they're called losses. There are 3 of them. We have said that we would need to see how strength of schedule would be evaluated by the college football playoff. With this outcome, we will need to assess how many Power 4 non-conference games make sense in the future to put us in the best position. Stop. That wasn't why Alabama didn't make the college football playoff. You lost 3 conference games. You also, because of who you are, get the benefit of the doubt because of what you've done over the years. And, yeah, you beat the hell out of Wisconsin at the time. No one knew they were going to end up not even making it to a bowl game. Your non-conference schedule had nothing to do with you missing the college football playoff. I don't understand that. I've seen that. Well, we don't need to play these games. Okay, then don't. Go ahead and play Mercer 4 times. Whatever you're going to do. And I love Alabama football. I mean, as a college football fan.
I think this would have been better positioned as an argument of this is why we in the SEC shouldn't go to 9 games.
I saw that. I saw a little bit of that. Yeah.
That's a better argument than this because that is more reasonable than it's because we scheduled tough games. Now, I mean, Alabama scheduled tough games in the past in the non-conference. They've done it a lot. This year was not that year, though. It was Mercer and USF and ULM and Wisconsin, who was 5-7. That was their moderately tough one, but nobody again, this is not Barry Alvarez, Ron Dane, Wisconsin this year. So you are what the record says you are, and your opponents are what they say they are. And if you were anybody else other than Alabama and had losses to 2 6-6 teams, the second of which was an absolute ass whipping in Norman, then you wouldn't even be able to make statements like this. So sometimes discretion is the better part of valor, and you say, well, next year we just shouldn't lose to 2 6-6 teams. You know, like that's the bottom line here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting used to seeing a lot of people complaining about the various stories that are out there, the seedings, the lack of this metric being considered versus that metric being considered. And, I mean, all of this is swirling out there. We've seen it all. Lane Kiffin's been a very vocal guy over the last couple of weeks. But this here made absolutely no sense to me. Mm-hmm. Like, it made no sense. And I saw a couple of Alabama fans in the replies, and like you have great respect for Alabama, but they were like, well, you don't get it, to anybody who was saying that it didn't make any sense, that his argument was very weak and was like meant for a different time period and a different discussion entirely, like Paul is saying. Like, there's a way to complain that made sense, but this wasn't the way to complain because it had nothing to do with what you were talking about, actually. Since, yeah, you didn't lose non-conference games to begin with. And so I saw these couple of Alabama fans circling around to people and telling them, well, you just don't get it. What he's trying to say is like, no, I still don't get it. I still don't understand the timing of this particular comment and why that had any bearing on what unfolded this weekend. So, yeah, I guess don't schedule the road trip to Wisconsin. I give you credit for scheduling that game. It didn't turn out to be much of a game because, again, Wisconsin's not very good. But, yeah, I think you deserve credit for that. So I guess what I did come to understand was that they deserve credit for merely scheduling tough, and that should overcome actually losing on the field. That's the argument he's making, right? That by scheduling tough games, not winning them, but just scheduling them, and I guess winning them too, like that trumps losing games. But they didn't
schedule the games they lost. They were given that schedule.
That's right. Exactly. No, what I'm saying, though, is that the only way I can understand his point is that in his head somehow he thinks that them going out and scheduling tough should overcome the losses on their schedule or should give them a bonus point in the overall comparisons versus the losses.
Yes, on top of the fact that they get that anyway because they're Alabama.
And they already play one less conference game.
Yes.
So they already playing one less conference game. And granted, you're using one of those 4 when a lot of others have 3, not everybody else. But you're using that to go to play Wisconsin on the road. Like, you deserve credit for that. But I'm guessing in his head he thinks that somehow should be factored in and offset the 3 losses in conference play. Again, his point doesn't really make that much sense.
No, by bringing up the non-conference schedule had no bearing on why Alabama missed the playoff.
And really, it's almost like he got his lines crossed and started talking about a different talking point that they've already kind of had out there, because you've seen the conversation in the offseason in particular about non-conference scheduling. We've talked about the potential Big Ten and SEC non-con, right, scheduling agreements and how they could box out other conferences in the future. So non-conference has been a talking point for a while, but I almost feel like he got his lines crossed and he thought he was a part of a different conversation, because, yeah, I felt what he put forth for this particular argument didn't really make a lot of sense. And I tried to understand the Bama fans who rolled back around in the replies to a lot of people going, well, you just don't get it. You don't understand his point. You're right. I don't, because I think it was completely misplaced, and I think that we are going to see teams making changes to their schedules as a result of the CFP. But
Okay.
I don't know why scheduling Wisconsin had anything to do with it, because it was losing to Vanderbilt, it was losing to Tennessee, and then it was getting your butts kicked by Oklahoma. That's what left you, and not just that, but then what unfolded with Clemson beating SMU. Like, it was a variety of factors. It had nothing to do with your non-conference schedule.
Had they beaten Wisconsin the way they did, and Wisconsin had finished in the top 15 or 20, would it have made a difference?
Say that again.
If they beat the hell out of Wisconsin, Wisconsin ended up 5-7. Had Wisconsin ended up 8-4, 9-3, like a Wisconsin program normally does, made it to a bowl game, would that have made any difference in the college football selection 12?
And it probably should have if they were good.
If they were good.
If they were
Okay,
good,
if
but
they were good,
but
right.
they weren't. And
Maybe they push out SMU
Yeah.
if that were the case.
But here's the thing. You can't, like, also part of that, like, where I get confused is, well, we scheduled Wisconsin. It's not our fault they sucked. Yeah, it's not anybody's fault that the teams you schedule suck, but they did.
Yeah, and
you can't, like,
listen, Alabama, and we've gone through the, there's a lot of programs that are not afraid, and they will always and continue to play. Byrne's not going to stop, like, scheduling really good non-conference game, neutral, home, away, whatever, like they've had with Texas 2 years ago, or Texas with Michigan, or Oklahoma and whoever else. It's going to happen. You have to with a program like that. Your fan base demands it. The other part of this is the fact that you cannot, because you lose games, you already are getting somewhat of a benefit.
Yeah.
Because of who you are, what you've done, and also in the conference you're in. But I don't understand. Well, I saw this too. Well, we're not going to play 9 conference games ever now. Why not? You're the badass teams in the SEC. I don't understand why you would say, well, we're not going to play another game. It had nothing to do with your, it's just weird that you're as powerful as you are, as great as you are, and yet you want to, well, we're not going to play 9 conference games.
Well, I mean, it's a completely different topic than what he's actually talking about. But we all know that other topic you just brought up, it all revolves around money, right? The TV networks say, here's a bunch of money to go play 9 conference games. They'll do that. That's a different argument. But to your point of what I think you're trying to say, if you're big, bad, and mighty, you'll take on all comers. And I think that's the way they portray it. I don't know. I don't want to get caught up in the anti-SEC thing again, because it just gets tiresome. But they do provide you a lot of ammunition. That's the hard part, is that you've got Lane Kiffin one day saying this, and then you've got Greg Byrne over the weekend saying that. And it does feel like there's just complaining that goes on, even though you're already sitting there on top of the pile of gold already with everything at your disposal, and like one thing doesn't go your way, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, the whole system needs to be completely changed to further benefit us. And it's like, how much can it further benefit you than it already does, man? So that does get tiresome. I just think this was a massive whiff by Greg Byrne. I think that the responses to this show that. I think that everybody's lack of really understanding what point he was trying to make shows that. And I think that he misread the temperature of the room, or maybe he didn't care. No, but either way, he did not have a point to stand on.
I think he misread the room, and I think he may have seen other chatter, and in this case, somebody should have probably stopped him for a second. And he's a hell of a dude, a heck of an AD, but here's what my other part is, all right, before we went to 12, right, when there were 4, Alabama and those schools are going to have to play games like that. Did they not play those games before because it might be more of a loss and they're not going to win a national title? No, they're playing games like that. They're going to play games like that. And Alabama is not going to stop having one nice, really good non-conference game, nor will most everybody else inside of college football's high level or not. Now, Jim Nagy, he runs the Senior Bowl. We know him. We've had him on the show. He's a heck of a guy, but he misread the room. As someone with access to college tape and staff of 11 former NFL scouts that logged hundreds of hours evaluating college football season, it's easy to see why the SEC coaches are upset with final playoff bracket. Based strictly off future NFL talent, Alabama, South Carolina, Ole Miss, throw in Florida, A&M, LSU, etc. I didn't know that the college football playoff final 12 standings is based off of talent you have that might go to the NFL. What the hell does that have to do with anything? Yeah. And I like Jim. It's like why the preseason polls and maybe initially are based off of recruiting rankings. No, that has nothing to do with it. Otherwise, there's going to be schools that never have a chance to be a part of the playoff if you send a lot of players to the NFL. Michigan's going to send another handful, right?
Yeah.
Who were they this year?
Yeah, they're 6-6 team, or 7-5. I'm sorry, 7-5. I forgot about that.
So
that last one. But Mark Shipper, who've had on the show a couple times.
So Mark Shipper's been on the show. Here's his response to Jim's tweet, and I think Jim was trying to maybe give his opinion on it, and I like the guy a lot, but it just didn't make sense. Don't play games. Seed the playoffs based on projected NFL talent. Backup seeding. Hypothetical win-loss matchups. Repeat irrational, indefensible claim that a difficult out-of-conference schedule, Western Kentucky, South Florida, and Mercer somehow led to a 9-3 team being left out of the playoffs.
It's almost perfect. You'd have to include the road trip to Wisconsin. I mean, that is the biggest game on there. But, yeah, the other 3 are not exactly world beaters. And I think Mark, did what a lot of people were probably thinking of doing or we're hoping that somebody else would do and point out the flaws in logic there. Jim Nagy's been on this show a lot of times, does a great job with the Senior Bowl, but yeah, chalk this up as another one of those hypothetical arguments or just arguments that don't make a lot of sense for the sport that we actually cover. I do feel like there's a lot of people that want this to be the NFL in the worst way. They want AFC, SEC, and NFC Big Ten, and they want things like that to matter, I guess. NFL talent versus the actual wins and losses. I feel like I'm following a different sport. I feel like I'm a fan of a completely different sport. I'm adjusting to all the things that are happening now. NIL, no problem. We've gotten past that. Expanded playoff, great. There's still these battles to wage about the importance of conference championship games. I think this weekend was not a sign of why you should get rid of them. It was a sign of why they're awesome.
No, absolutely.
And why they're great.
Yep.
And I think I'm very much anti getting rid of the conference championship games right now. But then there's these types of discussions that I just feel like I'm living in a different universe from other people sometimes. Of like, do we even cover the same sport? We clearly don't like it for the same reasons, because you like it just to see like NFL talent and teams that are loaded with NFL talent. Probably because that's your job. Like, I could see why that's appealing to Jim Nagy, because his whole job is scouting NFL talent and getting guys ready to go to the pros. So if that's what he wants college football to be, then great. But yeah, let's just get rid of the regular season. Let's just take the recruiting rankings, because those are never wrong. And let's go just apply those, and let's seed the playoffs based on recruiting rankings that are always right. I don't know, man. There's a lot of weird arguments being put forth because people, I guess, just don't know how to accept that, like, Arizona State's in the playoff and it's not South Carolina or something. I don't know, but there's a lot of bad arguments being made, and I just feel like I'm watching a different sport from other people, or I grew up watching a different sport from other people, and I clearly want to watch a different sport in the future than a lot of other people.
Because of the run that Alabama was on with Nick Saban, and also others in the SEC who had their runs too, right before it expanded to 4 teams in 2014 and then to 12 teams this year, it was kind of like everyone forgot there was 100 years of college football. Now, I'm not trying to say 1929 Minnesota would beat 1990 or 2001 Miami. I get that. But what's happened here is that people have just like forgot that as many national titles as a lot of the teams in the SEC have won, there have been 100 years of others winning national titles. College football can survive. Yes, college football can survive if Alabama or Ohio State or Michigan or whoever else don't win the national title or play for it this year. It's going to be fine.
Yeah,
it's going to be fine.
Sport's not going to crumble, and it very well could be like 4 teams from the SEC. I need to look at the bracket again. Is that even possible? Or like 3 out of the Final 4 could be whatever. Like
Georgia,
Texas,
Tennessee, and Texas could all be 3 of the 4.
Yeah, so like that's entirely possible. Thank you. So yeah, Texas could do it. Tennessee. So yeah, they couldn't do the SM. Well,
2 out of 4 could be the SEC.
Yes. 2 out of the Final 4 could be the SEC.
2 out of the Final 4 could be the you could
Big
only
Ten as
Big
well.
Ten, yeah.
Actually 3 out of the Final 4 could be Big Ten: Penn State, Indiana, and Ohio State. So they've actually got a better draw in that regard. But yeah, it does get tiresome. Again, that's why I feel like sometimes I'm watching a bit of a different sport than other people. The NFL guy wants to see things based on NFL talent. The SEC guy wants to see more SEC teams. Everybody's biases are just playing out. And to be unbiased is to be in the chair that I'm sitting in as much as possible. I don't know. I feel like I'm living in crazy world sometimes with some of these arguments being put forth, and it's just bad faith, and it's not even like a good, like the 2 we're mentioning in particular, like really don't even have great ground to stand on either. But that's where we are, and like I think that they stood out to me is when people talked about the expanded playoff. They talked about how it was going to devalue the regular season, right? It's going to devalue every Saturday, any given Saturday. Every Saturday means something. I feel like the regular season was as hot and popping as it ever was before. And yes, Alabama got to take an extra lump, or Georgia took an extra lump. And in the case of Georgia, it didn't affect their stock. Well, they won the freaking SEC championship. So, I think that they worked their way in there. They beat Texas twice. In Austin one of those times. On neutral site the other. They didn't even play them in Athens. They beat them twice. So, I think they deserve the benefit of the doubt. But all this hand-wringing over the expanded playoff devaluing the regular season, the only way it's devaluing the regular season is by the people who don't respect the regular season results.
Yeah.
That's the value in the regular season is you don't respect the regular season results. Not that there's more teams getting in.
Only when those results are not what you want to see.
Well, so you don't respect them. To my point. So so that's the devaluing of the regular season. If anything, is all of a sudden, that doesn't matter as much. I think we saw a little bit of that in terms of like when there was the arguments maybe a couple of weeks ago, and everybody was kind of twisted up in the same big ball of like what's going to happen here. And I did the logically of like, I don't know. Let's see these games played out and let's see what happens. And look, it cleared itself up. But I can understand why you feel like a couple of weeks ago a 2-loss team is, this never would have happened before. But you look up now, I think it's a pretty solid field, and there's definitely room to complain about who got in or who didn't or where teams were seated. But
there always was.
Yeah, there always was. Even with 4, even with 2. There was constant complaints with the BCS, which had no biases built in for the most part.
Which is why they developed the BCS, because of teams splitting the national title.
So I think that if you want to talk about devaluing the regular season, it's not 12 teams, it's not even 16 teams, it's not taking more losses, it's not respecting the wins and losses of any other team because they don't play under a conference banner. That's what can devalue the regular season. That's what I think you're seeing under attack right now as much as anything else.